Martin McNeil and Michelle Summers got married on February 21st of the year 78, and for years as their family grew thanks to their 8 children, they were the example of the ideal family. To everyone's eyes, they had a life, one could say, of dreams. But everything changed when on the morning of April 11th, Martin and his little daughter found Michelle lifeless. From this moment, it would be revealed that the life of the McNeil family was not as perfect as everyone thought. Let's start by giving a brief introduction of the family. A description. Michelle Mary Summers was born in the year 57 in Concord, California. She was an excellent student, played the violin, acted, was a cheerleader and prom queen. She was also Miss Concord in the year 76. On February 1st, 1956, she met Martin McNeil at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a Mormon temple, this during an activity for young Mormon adults. They started dating, but Michelle's family did not approve of the relationship. So she ran away with Martin and they got married on February 21st, 1978. 4 months into the marriage, Martin was accused of forgery, as I'm telling you, in addition to theft and fraud. So he went to prison and served a 6-month sentence. In 2007, the McNeil family moved to a gated community in Pleasant Grove, this in Utah. Together, they formed a family of 8 children: Rachel, Vanessa, Alexis, Damien, Giselle, Elle, Sabrina, and Ada, the latter being Vanessa's biological daughter, therefore the couple's granddaughter, whom they legally adopted, as well as 3 other daughters who were originally from Ukraine. Martin was a successful man. He was the medical director of the Utah State Development Center in American Fork. Before obtaining this position, he had also been a practitioner at Fishing Group. In addition to this, he served in the militia and graduated as a lawyer. The McNeil's marriage over time began to deteriorate. Things were not like before. Martin was increasingly distant from his wife, and she spent her time depressed due to her husband's lack of attention. In the eyes of others, they still seemed like the perfect marriage they had always been, but only they knew the reality of the situation. Martin McNeil suggested to his wife, changing the subject, that she have plastic surgery, which she initially refused, as her health was not the best, as she suffered from overweight and high blood pressure. But faced with the insistence and persistence of her husband and the possibility that the surgery could improve their marriage, Michelle agreed. She had found out that, on the other hand, her husband had been cheating on her a few months before the surgery. Her daughter Alexis had helped her to check the call history on her father's cell phone, and among all the numbers, the one that appeared most often was under the name of Gypsy, Jillian Willis. In addition, according to her daughter Rachel, every day Martin was more concerned about his physical appearance, looking better, and frequently going to tanning salons. This only made Michelle more certain about having the surgery. She thought that if she improved her physical appearance, and at the same time managed to look younger and more beautiful, her marriage would somehow be fixed, and her husband would supposedly, or she believed, leave his lover. In this way, they could be happy again. On the other hand, on April 3, 2007, Michelle had a facelift surgery. This is a medical process that involves removing excess skin on the face and neck. In this way, tightening the muscles, eliminating sagging, and improving the appearance of the face. Martin had taken care of finding the ideal surgeon for his wife, and he himself would take care of her in the post-operative period. He himself would take care of her in quotes, and also provide her with all the medications she needed. Michelle spent a night in the hospital and was discharged the next day. She returned home and, now under the care of her husband, care I say again in quotes, she began to consume a large amount of medications that the surgeon had prescribed her, among which were Vicodin, Zolpidem, diazepam, oxycodone, promethazine, cephalexin, and some others on Martin's own recommendations. Alexis, the eldest daughter of the couple, was on vacation from college, so she took the opportunity to visit her mother and see how she was doing health-wise after her surgery. By April 5th, 2 days after the operation, Alexis found her mother unconscious in bed. The girl obviously asked her dad why her mother was consuming such high amounts of medication. Her father simply told her that Michelle had vomited the medicines and that's why he had given her another dose. Obviously distrusting her father's attitude, she, Alexis, decided to stay the remaining days of her vacation to take care of her mother herself and thus give her the correct medication. Upon waking up, Michelle spoke with her daughter and asked her to please put each of the pills she had to take into her hands so that, by touch, she could discover their shape, and thus, in this way, Martin could not give her any other medication that was not within her prescriptions. Michelle had to use her hands, surely here. You're wondering why touch them? But this was because due to the surgery she had bandages on her eyes that for the moment did not allow her to see anything by April 6th. And with a better recovery thanks to her daughter's care, Michelle confronted her husband about the infidelity that she and Alexis had discovered days before the operation. She told her husband that they had known for some time that he was with another younger woman and that her name was Gypsy. Martin was furious that they had invaded his privacy by looking at his call history. Michelle, frightened by her husband's reaction, told her daughter that if anything happened to her, the first suspect would be Martin. Unfortunately, Alexis's vacation came to an end, and on April 10th, she had to return to Las Vegas, where her medical school was located. Nervous about leaving her mother in the care of her father, she called Michelle several times a day to make sure she was okay. On Wednesday, April 11th, she had spoken to her mother in the morning, and everything was fine until then. But around 9 in the morning, she received a call from her father, who was supposedly at work and very upset that Michelle wasn't answering the phone. He insisted that she try to see if she would answer. Alexis called her immediately, but she also had no success. At 11:35, Martin and his younger daughter Ada arrived home, and he asked the girl to go upstairs to check on Michelle. The girl quickly went up to the room, and when she looked for her in the bathroom, she saw her floating face down in the bathtub. Ada ran downstairs screaming, telling her father what had happened. Martin called emergencies, then sent his daughter to the neighbor's house, the Danos, to seek help. At that moment, Alexis called his father and told him that his mom was unconscious, she wasn't breathing, and that the ambulance was on its way. So the girl immediately left for the airport to quickly travel to Utah. The girl returned with the help of the neighbor, Christy Daniels. But Martin instead told her that he didn't need the help of a woman, but rather the opposite, the help of a man to supposedly help him get Michelle out of the tub. They immediately went to look for Doug Daniels. This was Christy's husband, and together they pulled her out of the water. But a lot of time had already passed since they had found her. Remember this part very well because all of this was a cunning plan. You'll see why in a moment. Going back, Martin, being a doctor, began the resuscitation maneuvers while he was shouting and wondering why, saying it was simply because of a stupid surgery. The emergency operator called Martin back and he told her that he was a doctor and that he was giving her cardiopulmonary resuscitation himself, and he hung up the call. When Alexis arrived, he found that his father had gotten rid of all the medications, as he had asked his son's girlfriend, Eileen Head, to flush everything down the toilet. That same April 11 at noon, Michelle was unfortunately declared dead at the age of 50, and according to the death certificate, the reason was accidental death, due to natural causes because of a cardiovascular disease. McNeil's marriage had ended after 29 years, 1 month, and 21 days, and the couple's eldest daughter had her mother's words echoing in her mind, where she was told that if anything happened to her, the main suspect had to be her dad. It had to be Martin. By April 14th, 2007, Michelle's funeral took place. Something that surprised the attendees was the widower's speech. Instead of talking about his wife and showing sadness or depression, he talked about how unfair life had been to him. He even dared to joke about being single again. 2 weeks later, Martin hired a new nanny for his youngest daughters, and it was none other than who you think. That's right, Gypsy Willis, his lover. When 2 of his daughters, Alexis and Rachel, found out who the new nanny was, they immediately confronted their father. The girls told him that they knew Gypsy was his lover, and that their mother had died worried about this, and they asked him to immediately remove her from the house. But Martin not only ignored them, but also kicked them out of the house, and didn't even let them take their things. When Gypsy moved into the house, she obviously did not fulfill her duties as the supposed nanny she was. She didn't cook, she didn't clean, and she certainly didn't take care of the children. Even so, 3 months after Gypsy moved into the house, Martin brazenly proposed to her with a $7,000 ring, but the marriage did not take place as Gypsy left the house shortly after. Alexis, however, was not at peace with the official reason for her mother's death. There were several things that didn't seem logical to her, one of them being that her father had asked for help to get his mother out of the bathtub when he could have perfectly done it alone. Do you remember when I told you to pay attention to that part? Well, this is the reason. He used to go to the gym and was fit, so she thought that the reason he had asked for help was simply an excuse to buy more time and let the woman die. The way Alexis drew attention to the authorities was by visiting various media outlets so they could hear her version of the events and the theories she had about her mother's death. But it seemed that no one could help her. However, not only Alexis was suspicious about the possible crime. Linda Clough, Michelle's sister, decided to write a letter to John Huntsman, the governor of Utah, and to a county law office, asking them to please investigate the reasons for her sister's death more thoroughly. Thus, after some time, the efforts of Alexis and Linda finally paid off, and Michelle's case was reopened, with detectives Doug Whitney and Jeff Robinson taking charge. And this is where things took a 180-degree turn for the drastic turn for the famed Dr. McNeil, as all the scams he had committed years ago were uncovered. Among these were that he had been responsible for inventing a mental illness, and that from his 20s to his 30s, he had cashed several fraudulent checks with which he had furnished his house. In addition, he had bought jewelry such as rings, diamonds, watches, lots of clothes, and several pairs of shoes. They also discovered that Martin had forged papers to enter the University of California and had falsified his application to study law. Apparently, the perfect and clean life of Dr. Martin McNeil was a shame and was full of scams. There were also heaps of buried lies that were slowly coming to light. In addition to Martin's crimes and frauds, it was also discovered that in '94, he had been accused of having an intimate relationship with a patient at the Brigham Young University Health Center, and when accused, he had attempted to take his own life. It was also revealed that he had an extramarital affair with Anna Osborne, the director of a laser hair removal clinic where he worked. On that occasion, his wife had also discovered it, as she constantly received suspicious calls. So Michelle had questioned him, causing Martin to confess the affair and ask for forgiveness, supposedly promising her that he would never do it again. But obviously he did not keep this promise. Well, this man loved LP. Well, shortly after he had met who you think. That's right, the one I mentioned earlier, Gypsy, who was a nursing student 20 years younger than him. He met her on an online dating site, and they quickly went from having conversations only through chat to having face-to-face dates. The same Gypsy in 2003 confirmed the relationship she had with Dr. McNeil, saying we met online. He sent me a message and asked me what I knew about quantum physics. There was just instant chemistry. He was tall, handsome, and spoke very well. She also admitted that since she didn't care about having anything serious with Martin, she didn't mind that he was married. But that didn't stop McNeil from paying many of her bills like rent and other personal expenses. Obviously, this woman also liked the LP, of course. And Martin apparently was the sugar daddy. The investigation that had started then progressed quickly. So Alexis and Rachel demanded a toxicology report to know the true cause of Michelle's death. The expert examination was carried out by Dr. Todd Gray, the chief medical examiner of the state of Utah. According to the doctor's report, none of the medications found in the victim's body had high toxicity levels. However, there was a mixture of some substances that combined could have led to a cardiac arrhythmia, and this could have been the cause of death. The medications were promethazine, zolpidem, diazepam, and oxycodone. On the other hand, in 2009, Martin was again in the eye of the storm due to an identity theft crime and was sentenced to 4 years in a federal prison. McNeil had used his adopted daughter, Giselle's data to get fake documents for his girlfriend Gypsy. For this, he sent Giselle, who was 16 at the time, to Ukraine for a supposed summer vacation. However, as time passed that she was supposed to be there, Martin didn't send her the money to return, and she stayed in Ukraine for almost a year, until her aunt Linda realized the situation and sent her daughter Jill Harper to go get her. When she found her, the girl was living in dire conditions. They reported to the authorities what had happened, and that's when Martin and Gypsy were arrested and charged with the crime of usurpation and forgery. Gypsy obviously denied everything, saying that she no longer knew the reality of the situation since she had trusted her boyfriend because he was a lawyer. Lie! She only cared about the money in the LP. On January 16, 2010, a new tragedy occurred in the family. Damien, son of Martin and Michelle, would take his own life at the age of 24. Before his death, the Utah County Attorney's Office had sent a letter to the New York Law School stating that the boy was dangerous and had homicidal ideas, mentioning that it was a joy to kill people. But returning to the sisters, Rachel and Alexis, after great efforts, on October 6, 2010, the cause of Michelle's death in the forensic report changed from undetermined to combined effects of heart problems and toxicity. It was also established that the victim would not have been able to take all those medications on her own, meaning that there was someone related to Michelle's death. By July 2012, Martin was released for the crime of forgery and identity theft, but by this point he was already the main suspect in the death of his wife. On August 24, 2012, Martin was finally officially charged with the murder of Michelle, and the trial began on October 17, 2013. Dr. McNeil claimed to be innocent of the charges like 90% of the criminals I make videos about, as they say they had nothing to do with it, and this would not be the exception. He said that his wife's death had been accidental. However, what played most against Martin was the fact that he was the one who had suggested to the surgeon to prescribe certain medications to his wife, and that he could have taken his wife out of the bathtub by himself and had deliberately delayed the action. In addition, during the trial that lasted about 22 days, the testimony of Martin's former lover, Anna Osborne, mentioned that on one occasion the doctor had confessed to her that he had caused the death of his brother Rufus Roy when he drowned him in the bathtub, and that he had tried to take his mother's life. And she also mentioned that once Martin had told her that there were many ways to kill a person and make the death seem natural. This man was a total piece of work. He was an aberration. Another testimony against this criminal was from his son's girlfriend, Damien, who mentioned that her father-in-law had forced her to flush all the medications that Michelle had been taking down the toilet. On the other hand, Doug Daniels, the neighbor who had helped get Michelle out of the bathtub, stated that while Martin was performing resuscitation maneuvers on his wife, it didn't seem to him that he was doing them correctly. In other words, it was simply a sham, which he found very strange, since he was a doctor and was supposed to know perfectly well how to perform resuscitation maneuvers. Also, on the other hand, the 911 operator Heidi Johnson stated that the first time Martin called emergencies, she didn't understand very well what he was saying, as he started shouting words that were not understood, and when trying to calm him down and get the necessary information to help him, he had hung up the call. And as we know, when the operator called him back, he had only told her that he was a doctor, and that he was already giving her resuscitation, and had hung up again. On the other hand, among the things that were also discovered was that Martin had tried to take his own life on 2 occasions when his wife had found him looking at adult material, and he had become very angry at his wife's questioning, threatening to take his own life if she continued to reproach him. This person was also narcissistic. At the end of the trial, it was concluded that the death had been caused by an overdose of medication that caused Michelle to lose consciousness and drown while bathing. The prosecutor in charge of the case, Chad Kernather, mentioned that it was almost a perfect murder, that Dr. McNeil knew perfectly well what he was doing, as the mix of medications was hard to detect in a toxicology test and could easily be confused with a natural death. And finally, on November 9, 2013, Martin McNeil was found guilty of first-degree murder of his wife, Michelle Summers, and just a few days later, on December 6, 2013, cowardly, Martin tried to take his own life in jail by cutting his leg with a razor and managed to pierce the femoral artery, but was rushed to a nearby hospital, and they managed to save his life. The following year, he was formally accused of intimately assaulting his daughter Alexis a few weeks after the death of her mother. He had entered his daughter's room at night and had begun to touch her, and when the woman the girl woke up. She woke up scared. The only thing he told her was that he had confused her with her mother for this crime. He was sentenced to 1 to 15 more years in prison as they were digging and bringing out more things. It was confirmed that this man was a complete monster, but Judge Derek Pulland sentenced Martin to 15 years in prison for murder and 15 more years for obstruction of justice with no possibility of parole until September 2031. But Dr. McNeil did not spend much time in prison as before, serving the first 4 years of his sentence on April 9, 2017, and at the age of 60, Martin McNeil cowardly. Because he was a coward, took his own life in the prison greenhouse using a natural gas hose. Meanwhile, Alexis continued with her life and decided to drop her father's last name, as she claimed not wanting to graduate and be called Dr. McNeil. She didn't want anything that related her to her father. She said that for her mother, her family had been the most important thing in her life, and she couldn't bear the idea that Martin had only deceived everyone all this time, with his endless lies, frauds, and crimes had cemented family life in complete farces. Besides, she would never forgive him for taking her mother's life, and just to stay with his lover and take her to live with him. After officially changing her last name to Summers, Michelle's maiden name, she graduated as a doctor, got married, had 3 children, and also adopted her younger sisters who were Ellie, Sabrina, and Ada. Currently, Ada is already attending college. Rachel graduated as a social worker and often spends time with her sister Alexis. Ellie and Sabrina have stable partners, and both had children, and Sabrina named her daughter Avery Mitchell in honor of her grandmother. Every year they get together on Mitchell's birthday and eat their favorite cake together. Alexis mentions that despite how much she misses her mother, she is very happy with her sisters and other families. Without their support, she would never have been able to move forward. She is glad that at least her mom got justice, and her crime did not go unpunished. Surely from above, this woman must be very proud of her daughters and sons. A life of fairy tales and an apparently perfect marriage, but which was actually built on lies, fraud, and crimes, had ended with the only definitive ending in this life: death. If you liked this video, don't forget to follow me now on my new page. I'm now posting shorts on my new channel, Pepe Mysterio Shorts. There you can see these shorts that are like TikToks. They are videos that last a minute. And see you in a new video tomorrow or maybe next week.